We are live. Cool. Hi. Okay, so welcome everybody to our online masterclass. We've got Michelle Dittmer from the Canadian Gap Year Association joining us tonight to talk about how to know if gap year is the right next step after high school, what to expect out of taking a purposeful gap year, and how you can make the most out of that experience for yourself so that you can better set yourself up for the future that you are embarking on once you head towards whether it's post-secondary education or whatever your next steps are. So for anybody who is listening live, definitely pop your questions and your comments into the chat and we will address them either as they come or at the end if we don't get to them right away. And if you are watching the replay, then you can do the same there. Leave a comment with your questions or what you want to know more of, and we will definitely get back to you. Okay, so welcome, Michelle. It's super exciting to have you here. I'm so glad you could join us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always great to talk to other people who are equally passionate about the success of our young people. So thank you so much for having me and allowing me to share what I know with your community.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a great fit because a lot of the students that I'm working with are trying to figure out those next steps in that direction for themselves. And I think there's a lot of misinformation out there around what it means to take a gap year or who it's for and who it's not for, et cetera. So this will be some excellent information for them to help them guide their decisions. And okay, so why don't we start off by explaining to people, like, what is the Canadian Gap Year Association and what do you do there?
Great question. So yes, there is an association. A lot of people are surprised by that. And we're a nonprofit organization that has been doing gap year things, mostly consulting for the last over a decade. So we started out as a for-profit and then 3 years ago made a switch to the nonprofit as the sphere of gap years in Canada is shifting dramatically and it's becoming exponentially more popular as a post-secondary choice.
Yeah.
So what we do is we're a place for people to start to get some traction. I often joke that my sole job is to give people permission to take a gap year.
Yeah.
And just allow that space for people to know that you or your kid are not going to spontaneously combust if you don't move directly from high school into post-secondary, and helping people connect with the resources to make sure that it's a meaningful year, that it's not what the parents' worst fear is sitting on the couch for a year.
Right.
So we help parents and families, number one, decide if a gap year is the right fit, because it's not right for everyone. Most people would benefit, but we will help you just make that decision. And then if it is the right decision for you, how do you make it purposeful? How do you pick the right opportunities? How do you set goals for yourself? And how do you work towards those goals? But also, how do you integrate back into whatever your next steps are after you finish your gap year?
Right, absolutely. Okay, so why don't we go into that conversation around who is it for? So who's going to benefit most from taking a gap year?
It really, really depends. And I don't like putting people into buckets, but if I had to, for the purpose of the folks listening, they do fall into certain categories. So we do have kind of this high achiever persona. And these are the folks that are used to really excelling in their academics, and they're recognizing that they're on the verge of burnout. So they have been working so hard to be on the honor roll. They've been part of all the clubs. They've got 700 volunteer hours, and they want to be successful in post-secondary, but they realize that their battery is just empty. And in order to see the same amount of success, in order to have the same opportunities to be as involved on campus, they need that time to recharge their battery. So that's number one. The second group of folks are folks that are looking for some sort of adventure. And this is kind of the stereotypical one that most people think of. And that is people looking to explore the world, but not necessarily just the world, but how do they fit into their community, both locally and globally, and change their perspective on how the world functions.
Yeah.
The third box of folks are people who are lacking clarity and direction in their life.
Yeah.
So really trying to say like, you know what, I don't know what I want to do. And I'm not prepared to spend tens of thousands of dollars and 4 years of my life if I'm not really sure. So
Yeah.
they take that year to really explore and suss things out and see other things,
Yeah.
so that they can make a more informed decision moving forward. Uh,
Brilliant.
the other buckets, we do get folks who maybe didn't get into their program of choice.
Mhm.
And this is also one of those other stereotypical things. Well, you didn't get in anywhere, so take a gap year.
Yeah.
Um, and that's a very, very small percentage of the folks that we work with.
Okay.
And some of them will spend their year actually building a portfolio. So a lot of folks who wanted to get into architecture or art programs and they didn't have a solid enough portfolio, they spend their year building out that portfolio so that they are successful the following year.
Yeah.
And then the last category of folks that I'll speak about now is folks who have some sort of barrier in their life. So maybe they've recently lost a loved one and they need some time to move past that, or they're working. Maybe they have an eating disorder that they want to get a handle on before adding on the stress of post-secondary. And then another big popular one is social anxiety. So
Mhm.
people recognizing that is something in their life that is going to be a barrier for them when they're moving into post-secondary. So spending some time to develop those critical skills in order to be successful moving forward. So if I had to put people into buckets, that's what it would be. But really anybody, as long as they're intentional with how they set up their gap year, would really benefit from that year.
Right. Okay, excellent. So that comprises a lot of different people. So, what can all of those people and their parents as well expect to gain from your gap year program?
So what we will do is we offer free 30-minute conversations where
Mhm.
we will work with you to either figure out if it is the right fit or what to do on that year. Because a lot of people will automatically jump to, well, which programs should I sign up for? What experiences should I be paying for? Where in the world should I travel to? And that's not necessarily the proper first steps when you're designing a gap year, because that can be very overwhelming. If you just jump into Google and you type in gap year programs, you're going to see thousands and millions of them popping up. And to be able to boil it down to which is the best program for you, you actually have to back up the process a little bit and start with what are some of your goals and what are your reasons for taking a gap year.
Yeah.
And then that helps to really boil it down and refine it. And then with our expertise, having worked with gap programs for the past over a decade, we can curate some of those for you. So we will go through our Rolodex of organizations that we've had previous clients that have had positive experiences with, folks that we can stand behind and say that this isn't just Joe from Indonesia who set up a really slick website. We could actually connect you with human beings so that you have that opportunity. So that's one of the main things that we do. But we also have an online gap year planning toolkit that
Okay.
folks can use. And this is really reassuring for parents because the fear is that they're not going to do anything over the year.
Yeah.
And so this will take you through the whole process. And because gap years are outside of the system, let's say,
Mhm.
the process for planning a gap year, you don't want to miss any of the pieces. And so the gap year planning toolkit will take you through step by step what that looks like.
Okay.
So those are some good resources for planning your gap year,
Right.
to make sure that you're headed in the right direction.
Okay. So, as they're going through those resources and the toolkit, is there sort of structure to what to expect and a process that they go through, kind of step one, step two, step three? And what are those different milestones that people work through?
Yeah, great question. So in the toolkit, we start off with really defining what your goals are for the year. So understanding and unpacking why you're taking the year
Mhm.
and what are the specific things that you want to achieve by the end of your year. And so that's a big piece. And from there, we'll help you to figure out how do you do proper research when you are doing those Google searches. And let's say you have a particular interest in, we had one client that was really interested in fountain pens. So Okay, that was a new one for us. So how do you actually do a proper Google search to be able to find opportunities that were related to fountain pens? And then how do you build the rest of the year out around that? And we really guide you through building a holistic gap year. It's not just about travel, but how do you look at all the different pillars that make a very quality gap year? So are you working? Are you volunteering? Are you picking up old hobbies that you have left behind because you were too busy working on your academics? Or are
Wow.
you picking up something you always thought you might like, man, I really wish I knew how to build a cabinet. So you take a cabinet making course, or you want to try your hand at coding, or whatever your different interests may be. So we'll help you round out the year to make sure that it's not just one-sided, and that you're factoring in things like making sure that you stay social, because sometimes when all of your friends are continuing on into university, it can feel a little bit isolating. So how
Right.
do you pick the right activities that are going to keep you engaged, not only cerebrally and mentally, and keep you stimulated, but how are you going to make new friends? How are you going to connect with other people?
Mhm.
And then we take you through, how do you plan like a calendar year? Like, some people just forget that the weather in Australia, they have the flipped seasons to us. So they think they're going to be heading down to Australia in June and July, and they end up there in the middle of the winter.
Yeah.
Or they're in Indian monsoon season. So how do you do that, and how do you build that around important dates that you have in your life? Maybe you've got a wedding that you want to be home for, or a particular holiday you want to be home for. So how do you factor that in? And
Mhm.
then how do you plan for re-entry afterwards? So are you factoring in dates when it comes to reapplying to post-secondary? Are you factoring in any of your deferral dates that you may
Mm.
need? And how do you reintegrate back into a system after you've completed your gap year?
Yeah. Wow. So it goes through so much. So it seems like a very all-encompassing program, almost like life coaching for these students to really think about all these different areas of their lives and how to, what to think about that they haven't even realized they need to be thinking about yet. So,
Yeah, and I think it's really reassuring for parents and for students to have somebody guide them, because it's not like applying to university where there's like one form, fill out this one form and click these three things, and we will do the rest for you. There's a lot of legwork from the family's end.
yeah.
And if you don't know where to start, that can be very overwhelming. So our goal is to take out that overwhelm, and provide you with bite-sized chunks. You can either sit down for a weekend and power through the whole thing, or
Yeah.
you can take it in bite-sized steps and do it one night a week for a month. So it's totally self-paced.
Mhm.
And after each little level, there's an opportunity to submit information, and that comes to myself, and I will provide feedback for you along the way, so that you do have, you are tapping into somebody who knows what they're doing. You're not just a free for alling, and hoping for the best. That you do get that feedback along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a huge piece to the puzzle, is being able to check in and have somebody to bounce those ideas off of and just make sure that they're on the right track.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, awesome. Now, I've heard you talk before about some of the aspects of the program, I think getting broken down into different segments. So you've got stuff on education and career planning, but you've also got stuff about tying into the UN sustainability initiatives. Talk
Yeah.
a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So if you've made the decision that you're taking a gap year, this year we're launching a gap year certification. So the first part is, for those who want to plan a year. For those who are on their year, we do have a gap year certification. And this is something that came about because people were needing a little bit of structure to help really plan a really meaningful year. And so, what we have done is, we've looked at what are some of the skills and what are some of the opportunities that are pretty universal for those on a gap year, and the pieces that really connect into future success. So, personal and professional success.
Yeah.
And so, in this certification, it acts as a community of people who come together. And they have an opportunity to connect on Slack and talk and share ideas and resources, but we also provide resources for all of the different pillars. And in order to achieve the certification, there are certain things that you need to do on your gap year, and they're not unattainable. They're very, very easy. One of them is to have a gap year plan. So your plan can change a million times, but you need to be intentional and thoughtful about what you're doing. So you need to have a plan. The second piece is you need to have a mentor. And this is really important. One of the things that we don't teach very well in the school system, and something that we're losing, is this idea of networking and finding somebody other than mom or dad that can be somebody that you can turn to and ask questions of. So whether that's somebody you admire because of their professional life, because of their values, because they have something that you aspire to, having somebody and connecting with them and having a professional relationship with them where they can act as a mentor to you is the second piece. So a plan and a mentor. You also need to do something related to your personal identity. And whether this is exploring your own values, exploring who you actually are. Sometimes in high school, we get pigeonholed because we've been with the same friends in the same environment for so many years. So you've always been the jock, or you've always been the nerd, or you've always been the insert whatever you've been labeled.
Right.
And a gap year can be a really great opportunity to check in with yourself and say, is that actually who I am? And is that who I want to be in my adult life? So they have to do something for their identity. They need to do something for their personal wellness. Again, we have this buzzword of self-care that keeps floating around. But it really is checking in with yourself and say, what do I need to be well? Whether that's physically well or mentally well or emotionally well. I don't really care what you choose. So if you want to go for a walk in the woods once a week because that connects you with yourself and your wellness, go for it. You want to join a gym, you want to do a diet plan or a nutrition plan, you name it. It's totally up to you. You need to do something related to your career and educational pathways. And really tapping into maybe exploring some things. So you could either do informational interviews with folks, you could go and tour some campuses, you can do some research on college programs, whatever that might look like. And then something to do with financial literacy. So something with money. Whether that is invest in the stock market for the first time, do your own taxes, make a budget for your gap year, or make a budget for your first year after your gap year. The sky is the limit there. And then the final piece, this sounds very complicated, but it's really not, is to do a project that relates to one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And so these are the things that the UN has identified as the major challenges that we are facing in the 21st century. And each and every one of us has a role to play, whether big or small or local or globally, on all of these different issues. And so this is an opportunity for a young person to identify what skills they have. So this isn't about needing to go for further education or school or knowing more or getting more money, but what resources do you currently have internally and then around you? And how are you going to impact that particular issue? So the example I like to use is somebody who is an artist, and perhaps the issue that they're most passionate about is gender equality. So maybe they want to use their skills as an artist to create an exhibition that brings out, that highlights what's happening with gender inequality in their community, and then get that exhibit put up at the local library. So it doesn't have to be that you're going to solve gender equality issues around the globe, but what little piece can you play, given your gifts and talents, in order to make this world a better place?
Amazing. Oh, I love that. I'm a big fan of holistic approaches, where we're looking at all these different aspects of ourselves. And I know for me, I work a lot on the identity piece, and I work a lot on the purpose and direction pieces, but there's so much more to it than that, like looking at finances and understanding what does the world need, taking care of your mental and emotional well-being as well as your physical wellness. So it's just so many good things in there that I think overall so many students need to spend a lot more time and attention focusing on, that we just don't do that good of a job in schools.
Yeah, and I think even if you're not a student, I think as a grown-up, like these are the things that I know that I need to spend more time on as well. So I think that's a really great gift that we can give our young people, is giving them the time and the space to figure those things out before it's crowded with the other pieces that come with adulthood. before that post-secondary academic side kicks in, before having to get a job and a career and all those other things that can feel very heavy when you're young. If you don't have that foundational base, or you don't have the skills to tap into it, then you can be starting out on a rocky foundation. So a huge gift you can give somebody is giving them permission to slow down, to figure it out, and then move forward with their best foot forward.
Yeah.
A really great analogy that really rings true for me is, if you think about, if you and your friends are going out for dinner, you probably spend between 5 and 10 minutes deciding where you're going to go for dinner. And that's a pretty inconsequential thing. Right. So 5 to 10 minutes for like a 2-hour dinner. If you actually extrapolate those numbers out and you say the dinner is your entire working career, that 10 minutes actually equates to 2 entire years, which is just something that's so interesting to me, that these large decisions where we're pushing people to go fast and hard and make hasty decisions,
right,
based on sometimes peer pressure, sometimes parental pressure, sometimes just keeping up with the Joneses. Like I heard McGill's a good school. Doctors make a lot of money. And that's not always necessarily the best way to be moving forward to lead a happy, healthy, and productive life. And that's what we want for our kids and for society, for people to be happy and healthy and successful.
Absolutely. And even the number of people making these decisions out of fear of what will happen. Like, what will happen if I take a year off? What if I don't go now? Will I ever want to go? Or what if I make the wrong choice? And running those worst case scenarios through their mind, as opposed to just focus on the now. Like, what do you need now in order to support yourself best with your next step? Instead of chaos and panic about the next 40 years of your life.
Yeah. And I think that's something as like grown-ups. I pretend I'm not a grown-up, but I guess I am. We have to realize that we have this life perspective. And that's something we need to share with the young people in our lives, that the only thing you're racing towards is the grave, and you really don't want to be racing that fast.
Right.
So slowing down is actually going to speed you up in the long run.
Yeah.
The studies out of the US show that people who take a gap year finish their undergrad in fewer years, because they're making an intentional decision, because they are picking a program that is a better fit for them.
Yeah.
They're not switching 3 or 4 times and spending extra years and spending extra dollars on their program of choice. They're taking that gap year, that 1 year, and they're being intentional about getting clarity, and then stepping into a program that's likely a better fit for them. And for those who are worried about not returning back to school if you take time off, the stats show that Canadians, 81% of people will return back to post-secondary.
Right.
So every parent is always going, oh, my kid's one of those 19%.
Yeah, of course.
Of course, that's where your brain goes. 81, that's not very high. But if you actually look at the numbers of students who drop out after first year, depending on which study you look at, it kind of hovers around 14%. And the 14% and the 18% are surprisingly similar. Yeah. And I would hazard a guess that if they were the same people, they would be the same people. So my sense, and I have no data to back this up, is that if you are destined for post-secondary, you will make it in post-secondary. Yeah. If that is not the path for you, then you're not going to make it, whether you head directly out of grade 12 or if you take a gap year and choose and find a passion and find a vocation somewhere else. That there is an opportunity to make the most of this year, and be intentional and get some more clarity and be set up for success, whatever that path looks like after graduating.
Yeah. And I love the permission piece you touched on earlier, because I feel the same way about so many of the clients that I'm working with. I feel like at the beginning, I'm just giving them permission to want whatever it is that they want. Whether it's, and a lot of the time they're tapped into sort of like, I'm not supposed to want to go in this direction because I'm supposed to want to be a doctor, lawyer, or engineer. I'm supposed to care more about money. I'm supposed to, want the safe, secure 9 to 5. I don't. But I'm supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's giving them permission to just be okay with whatever it is that you do want. And then later on, it's permission again for whatever path's going to get you there. And I say that a lot to people. So as soon as you open up with, I'm giving people permission to take a year off, it's like, yes, they don't need it, but they don't know that they don't need that permission. And they don't even know that they're looking for that permission. So just by saying, you know what, yes, you can do this and it's going to be in your own best interest, it takes such a weight off their shoulders.
Yeah. And I think parents need to hear that as well. That as parents, statistics show that you are the strongest influencer of your child's career.
Absolutely.
And when your expectations of your kids differ from their expectations of themselves, it puts unbelievable stress on their mental health, because they want nothing more than to please you. Believe it or not, your teenager does still want.
They may not admit it, but it's true.
They do. They do. They want to make you proud. And so as a parent, the words that you say, the conversations that you have sit incredibly heavy on their shoulders. So it's an opportunity for really opening dialogue and making those things okay. Because when there is incongruency between what you're projecting onto them and what their desires and what their aptitudes and their interests are, that's where you're going to be setting your kid up for some challenges.
Right. And all of this is happening anyways. It's happening unconsciously. So nobody's out there saying like, I'm going to set my kid up for failure and I'm going to have expectations here and you're going to have desires over here and I'm going to make sure these don't get met. But that's what's going on below the surface. And unconsciously, we're potentially saying one thing like, oh, I just want you to be happy. But our actions and the other messages we're sending are, but make sure that you choose to be happy with A, B, C, D, or E. These are the 5 paths that are okay. So yeah, and nobody means that, right? Like everybody has the best intentions, but the messages that we're sending and as parents, the messages that have been sent throughout their entire life, unconsciously are creating programs in kids that tell them what's okay and what's not okay. So to give them this time to really back up and go, wait a minute, what do I actually want for myself? Who am I? What do I like? Where am I going? Because I also think that school can distort that quite a bit. And through school, you're sitting, in a certain chair, in a certain classroom, learning certain things, being told how to act, how to behave, told what to do, what not to do, what to like, what not to like. So it's like your identity is being like handed to you in a box, like this is who you're supposed to be. And so giving them this time lets them sort of back up and just say, okay, now that we're removing the school system and just focusing on you as an individual, let's take a look at what you actually like and who you are, which I think is super meaningful.
And I think it's also really important to acknowledge here that this isn't necessarily a situation of privilege where like you have all the money in the world. And so you just take a year to like find yourself and like go on yoga retreats and just find yourself and somebody will pay your around the world ticket.
Yeah.
That's really not the case. And it is a misconception about gap years that it's kind of the Prince William effect, where you have this incredibly sexy, romantic travel around the world, head to Africa and work with all the starving children, and get all the Instagram pictures, when the reality is that the vast majority of people who are taking time off are working.
Yeah.
They realize that they need the financial support in order to not come out in such debt at the end of it.
Yeah.
So they're taking that time either for financial reasons or they want to test out different fields. So they're going to go work in a law firm and say, yes, this is an environment that I would like to work in. Right. Or absolutely not. That was terrible. I hated every minute of it. And that growth, and it's not just this kind of existential find yourself, but actually be very concrete and tangible in the actions that you take on this year, in order to get that clarity, instead of just looking for it in the stars, because that's not how you're going to boil down to it and get to the essence of who you are.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And in going back to that working conversation, they will gain so much insight about themselves from taking that time and working, even if it's, a job where they say this is nowhere near what I want to be doing for the rest of my life or even for the next few years. But they will learn what they do like, what they don't like, different work environments, what energizes them, what drains them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I hear from parents too that they're scared that their kid is going to get a taste of money. And they're not going to go back because they're like, man, I'm a millionaire. I am making minimum wage, but I'm working 40 hours a week. I'm set.
Right.
And that really isn't the case. So I've been doing this for 10 years. I've talked to a lot of alum who've been through this process, and yes, the first paycheck, they're going to blow on a new iPhone or a new pair of sneakers or something, but really, who didn't blow their first paycheck? But that sense of money doesn't necessarily explode and take over, and they recognize that the things that they want in life can't necessarily be afforded on minimum wage, or working the hours that they're able to put in as a 17-year-old, with the lifestyle that they want to lead in order to have the life that they want. So it does give perspective. And it connects them with a different community of people. So often, when they're working with full-fledged grown-ups. And so they learn how to operate with people who are not exactly their age, the way that the school system has been set up. So learning to network and communicate with people of different ages and different backgrounds, and being able to really tap into a more diverse environment when it comes to people, it gives them such a different perspective, and allows them to approach all the other things in their life in a completely different way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the power of networking that can come out of that too, by talking to people and they're asking them, like, if you say you're taking a gap year and you're working at the same time, chances are people are going to be asking you regularly, like, what are you doing here? And what's your plan with your life? And what's next for you? Are you staying here? Or are you going somewhere else? And those are great opportunities to have conversations with people outside of your normal circle. To tell them what your hopes and dreams are and where you're stuck. And you never know who those people can connect you with or who they might know that can help you even further.
Yeah, it's so beautiful to hear these people and the perspective that they get and the appreciation they get for different stages and phases of life, and just understanding. Like I just did a podcast a couple weeks ago with Grace, who was talking about, she was a server on her gap year, and just hearing the different stories of the different people that were working there. So some of them were single moms, some of them were doing it as a side while they were getting a business up and running. So just seeing different pathways and what led them to be where they are in their life. And I think it's important that we see the diversity, because we're fed this narrative that life is linear, and that you go to school and you get a job and it just goes in one direction, when the reality is, I would say, that less than 1% head in a linear direction. And so to actually get out and have those conversations and talk to real people about the diversity in pathways is such a valuable experience, because you can start to feel more comfortable with your own pathway when it takes those twists and turns.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. The amount of experience and just life experience and intention and insight that comes out of this is something that I think we don't necessarily teach students how to do at a young age. And it's things that for me, through entrepreneurship and just my life journey, have been figuring out, like, oh, okay, here's some times where I need to slow down and take a look and reflect, and or think about who's going to mentor me through this, who can I go to that has done what I want to do, who can show me maybe an easier way. And those are things that I kind of figured out and am learning through my own journey. But to have it part of a process, to tell students early on, here's some things to think about. Definitely makes the road a little less bumpy along the way.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you say that, because we're really reverting back to the way things used to be before everybody did post-secondary education.
Mm-hmm.
So if we go back 60, 70, 80 years ago, when higher education was for a very small piece of the population, you did just that. You found a mentor in a line of work that was interesting to you, and you apprenticed under them.
Yeah.
And you formed relationships and you networked and you got a job with your uncle's neighbor because that was an industry that was interesting to you and they knew somebody.
Yeah.
So I think it's very interesting that we kind of have this cyclic way that we yeah, I think it's really, really neat that we're having those realizations that maybe the pendulum has swung too far in
Right.
direction, and we need to look back to some of the knowledge that exists in our communities. And now that we have the internet and we're connected in infinite ways, how do we leverage that, and how do we use that to our advantage and reconnect as human beings?
Yeah, absolutely. Because so now, we look at our society and education, typical educational pathways now, it has gone so far the other direction that so many people are getting a university degree that it's no longer the golden ticket, right? And so if we take a look at students today and say, you know what, this is really relevant and important and necessary for certain professions, and for others it's really not, and either way there's more to it. You can't just go to school and get the degree and expect life to fall into place now. So regardless of whether a university degree is the best next step for somebody or not, there's got to be more to their plan, beyond just the educational piece. And so for the students that I work with, many of them are trying to figure out, what do I take in school? Just tell me what to take in school. And it's like, okay, let's hold the phone on that for a minute and back this up to take a look at, what's the purpose of your school even going to be? Where do you want it to take you? And in order to answer that question, we got to back up even further to say, well, first, who am I? Who am I now? Who am I becoming, or who do I want to become in the future? And what's important to me about my future? Where do I want to be able to go? And then let's assess career direction. And then after that, let's figure out the education that will get you there. But we got a whole bunch of questions to answer before we go, oh, what am I going to apply to in school? Which I think everybody's just trying to find an answer to that question.
And I think that's why we get along so well, because the process is so similar, whether you're counseling on what educational and career pathway or what to do on a gap year. And it starts with some of that soul searching and some of that reflection piece that we have squeezed out of our lives, to make space for more content, for more achievement, that introspection and that pausing and slowing down and thinking, have been expedited and moved out of the way to make space for other things. And I think that is leading to a lot of the challenges that we see with people feeling dissatisfied with their lives, because what they're doing isn't aligning with who they truly are and who they want to be. So that's why our missions are so well aligned.
Yeah.
And the way that we serve people, depending on what stage they're at, is very similar.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so for students who are considering taking a gap year and they're looking into the CanGap Association, how will they be able to get the most value out of this year? What does that take?
Yeah. So depending on what stage you're at, again, booking that free 30-minute call is just so valuable, just to get your questions answered, because each person is on an individual journey. And I can help give you those first couple steps in that call, which will be really, really helpful for you. And the month of April is also going to be a big push for us to get you lots of information. So make sure you're following us through our newsletter. So you can go to cangap.ca and subscribe to that newsletter, or you can follow us on our social channels. We're constantly posting really great, well, I think they're great because I post them, information, different statistics, different opportunities, different events, online and in person. So those are really the best ways that you can follow us and get the information that pertains to whatever stage you're at, and really tap into that, because it isn't something that you need to do alone. And I equate what we do to Weight Watchers. So of course you can do it on your own.
Right.
You know the pieces, you know the tools, but do you have the community? Do you have the support? Do you have the resources? Do you have the plan that will help you get there faster, more efficiently, give you the accountability that you need, and then be able to celebrate with you when you get there? So it's not rocket science, but it's something that is worth investing in, because you're investing in yourself. So in the same way that you would invest in a year of formal education, this is really an investment in a year of informal education that's going to set you up for success in your career.
Brilliant. Yeah, and this is such an important time of year for people who are figuring out, what am I doing next year? Or parents who are looking at their kids, wondering what this is going to be like as they transition out of high school and into whatever's next. Whether, some students have applied and are now deciding like, oh, okay, either I got in, yay, am I really ready for this? Or I didn't get in, and what's next? Or are questioning their direction and in this transition. So it's a really important time of year. So I'm excited for people to reach out to you and learn more, and definitely take advantage of that complimentary call with you. So where can people follow you? You said online at cangap.ca.
You got it.
Okay.
We're also on Twitter at the letter U, CanGap, and then Instagram at CanGap Association. And those are the best channels where you can find us.
Excellent. Okay, thank you so much, Michelle. Do you have any closing words for people? Anything you want them to know?
I guess the only thing that we didn't really touch on that I want to throw out there is that you can defer an acceptance.
Oh, yes.
So if you did receive your dream school, your dream program, but you still feel that you're not quite ready, you can reach out to the university and ask them to defer the acceptance. And what that means is that you want to accept that position, that space that they've held for you, but you don't want to attend this September. You want to attend the following September. And these are done on a case-by-case basis at most institutions. So I can't say 100% if you're in this program at this school, they will say yes, but it's definitely worth checking out. And if you need more help with that, by all means, reach out, and I'm more than happy to do that.
Okay, that's so good to know. I think people sort of get that acceptance and then think like, well, I got in, so I got to go. And if you're not ready, or if you're unsure of your path, then that's a great option to at least consider and see if putting it off for 1 year while you really invest in a purposeful gap year, not just a sitting on the couch playing video games year. That's definitely an important piece to consider.
You got it.
Thank you so much for joining me. This has been tons of great, valuable information for parents and students alike who are maybe wondering what's next and what all is out there. So thanks for providing this information, and I'm excited for people to reach out to you and learn more.
Thank you so much for having me. Take care.
Yeah, you too. Bye.